Chapter 5. Possibilities of a pleasant outing. It was a family saying that you never knew which way Charlotte Bartlett would turn. She was perfectly pleasant and sensible over Lucy's adventure, found the abridged account of it quite adequate, and paid suitable tribute to the courtesy of Mr. George Emerson. She and Miss Lavish had had an adventure also. They had been stopped at the Daisy-O coming back, and the young officials there, who seemed impudent and desouvre, had tried to search their reticules for provisions. It might have been most unpleasant. Fortunately, Miss Lavish was a match for anyone. For good or for evil, Lucy was left to face her problem alone. None of her friends had seen her, either in the piazza or, later on, by the embankment. Mr. Beebe, indeed, noticing her startled eyes at dinner time, had again passed to himself the remark of too much Beethoven. But he only supposed that she was ready for an adventure. Not that she had encountered it. This solitude oppressed her. She was accustomed to have her thoughts confirmed by others or, at all events, contradicted. It was too dreadful not to know whether she was thinking right or wrong. At breakfast next morning she took decisive action. There were two plans between which she had to choose. Mr. Beebe was walking up to the Torre del Gallo with the Emersons and some American ladies. Would Miss Bartlett and Miss Honeychurch join the party? Charlotte declined for herself. She had been there in the rain the previous afternoon. But she thought it an admirable idea for Lucy, who hated shopping, changing money, fetching letters, and other irksome duties, all of which Miss Bartlett must accomplish this morning and could easily accomplish alone. "No, Charlotte," cried the girl, with real warmth. "It's very kind of Mr. Beebe, but I am certainly coming with you. I had much rather." "Very well, dear," said Miss Bartlett, with a faint flush of pleasure. That called forth a deep flush of shame on the cheeks of Lucy. How abominably she behaved to Charlotte, now as always. But now she should alter. All morning she would be really nice to her. She slipped her arm into her cousin's, and they started off along the Lung Arno. The river was a lion that morning in strength, voice, and color. Miss Bartlett insisted on leaning over the parapet to look at it. She then made her usual remark, which was, "How I do wish Freddie and your mother could see this, too." Lucy fidgeted. It was tiresome of Charlotte to have stopped exactly where she did. "Look, Lucia. Oh, you are watching for the Torre del Gallo party. I feared you would repent you of your choice." Serious as the choice had been, Lucy did not repent. Yesterday had been a muddle, queer and odd, the kind of thing one could not write down easily on paper, but she had a feeling that Charlotte and her shopping were preferable to George Emerson and the summit of the Torre del Gallo. Since she could not unravel the tangle, she must take care not to re-enter it. She could protest sincerely against Miss Bartlett's insinuations. But though she had avoided the chief actor, the scenery unfortunately remained. Charlotte, with the complacency of fate, led her from the river to the Piazza Signoria. She could not have believed that stones, a loggia, a fountain, a palace tower, would have such significance. For a moment she understood the nature of ghosts. The exact site of the murder was occupied, not by a ghost, but by Miss Lavish, who had the morning newspaper in her hand. She hailed them briskly. The dreadful catastrophe of the previous day had given her an idea which she thought would work up into a book. "Oh, let me congratulate you," said Miss Bartlett. "After your despair of yesterday. What a fortunate thing. Aha! Miss Honeychurch, come you here, I am in luck. Now, you are too. Tell me absolutely everything that you saw from the beginning." Lucy poked at the ground with her parasol. "But perhaps you would rather not?" "I'm sorry if you could manage without it. I think I would rather not." The elder ladies exchanged glances, not of disapproval. "It is suitable that a girl should feel deeply." "It is I who am sorry," said Miss Lavish. "Literary hacks are shameless creatures. I believe there's no secret of the human heart into which we wouldn't pry." She marched cheerfully to the fountain and back and did a few calculations in realism. Then she said that she had been in the piazza since 8 o'clock collecting material. A good deal of it was unsuitable, but of course one always had to adapt. The two men had quarreled over a 5-franc note. For the 5-franc note she should substitute a young lady, which would raise the tone of the tragedy and, at the same time, furnish an excellent plot. "What is the heroine's name?" asked Miss Bartlett. Leonora said Miss Lavish, her own name was Eleanor. I do hope she's nice. That desideratum would not be omitted. And what is the plot? Love, murder, abduction, revenge was the plot. But it all came while the fountain plashed to the satyrs in the morning sun. I hope you will excuse me for boring on like this, Miss Lavish concluded. It is so tempting to talk to really sympathetic people. Of course, this is the barest outline. There will be a deal of local coloring, descriptions of Florence and the neighborhood, and I shall also introduce some humorous characters. And let me give you all fair warning. I intend to be unmerciful to the British tourist. Oh, you wicked woman, cried Miss Bartlett. I am sure you are thinking of the Emersons. Miss Lavish gave a Machiavellian smile. I confess that in Italy my sympathies are not with my own countrymen. It is the neglected Italians who attract me and whose lives I am going to paint so far as I can. For I repeat and I insist, and I have always held most strongly, that a tragedy such as yesterday's is not the less tragic because it happened in humble life. There was a fitting silence when Miss Lavish had concluded. Then the cousins wished success to her labors and walked slowly away across the square. She is my idea of a really clever woman, said Miss Bartlett. That last remark struck me as so particularly true. It should be a most pathetic novel. Lucy assented. At present her great aim was not to get put into it. Her perceptions this morning were curiously keen, and she believed that Miss Lavish had her on trial for an ingenue. She is emancipated, but only in the very best sense of the word. Continued Miss Bartlett slowly. None but the superficial would be shocked at her. We had a long talk yesterday. She believes in justice and truth and human interest. She told me also that she has a high opinion of the destiny of woman, Mr. Eager. Why, how nice. What a pleasant surprise. Ah, not for me, said the chaplain blandly, for I have been watching you and Miss Honeychurch for quite a little time. We were chatting to Miss Lavish. His brow contracted. So I saw. Were you indeed? Andate via sono occupado. The last remark was made to a vendor of panoramic photographs who was approaching with a courteous smile. I am about to venture a suggestion. Would you and Miss Honeychurch be disposed to join me in a drive some day this week, eh? Drive in the hills? We might go up by Fiesole and back by Sedignano. There is a point on that road where we could get down and have an hour's ramble on the hillside. The view thence of Florence is most beautiful, far better than the hackneyed view of Fiesole. It is the view that Alessio Baldovinetti is fond of introducing into his pictures. That man had a decided feeling for landscape. Decidedly. But who looks at it today? Ah, the world is too much for us. Miss Bartlett had not heard of Alessio Baldovinetti, but she knew that Mr. Eager was no commonplace chaplain. He was a member of the residential colony who had made Florence their home. He knew the people who never walked about with beaded ears, who had learned to take a siesta after lunch, who took drives the pension tourists had never heard of and saw by private influence galleries which were closed to them. Living in delicate seclusion, some in furnished flats, others in Renaissance villas on Fiesole's slope, they read, wrote, studied, and exchanged ideas, thus attaining to that